welcome back to Reimagine Ownership. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And as always, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. On today's pod, we have a great guest in studio with us, and she's a friend of Metaversal's Amanda Schmidt. Let me tell you a little bit about her background so we can jump right into our discussion. She is a visionary curator. We first met at some point the last 2 years or so. And she's an art advisor and a driving force in the integration of digital art into the traditional art world, a topic we have always been passionate about. Amanda is widely recognized for her expertise in contemporary art, having curated groundbreaking exhibitions and guided collectors in acquiring significant works from both the 20th and 21st centuries. In recent years, Amanda has played a crucial role in shaping the conversation around digital ownership, particularly through NFTs. She was instrumental in facilitating the historic acquisition of a complete set of autoglyphs, a pioneering on-chain generative art project for a whopping 5,000 ETH, one of the most significant NFT purchases to date. Her work has helped bridge the gap between blockchain-based art and institutional collecting, ensuring that these digital assets find their place in museums and private collections alike. Beyond her work in curation and acquisitions, Amanda has been a leading advocate for the transformative potential of NFTs. She sees them, similar to us, not just as speculative assets, but as a new medium for artists, a tool for provenance, and a revolution in how we define ownership in the digital age. In this episode, we're going to explore Amanda's perspective on the evolution of digital ownership, the role of NFTs in reshaping art markets, and what the future holds for collectors, creators, and curators in the Web3 era. Welcome to the Reimagine Ownership
Thank
podcast.
Thank you for having me. What a very, very kind introduction.
Well, we want to capture the fulsomeness of your experience. So I'm thrilled that we're going to be having lunch. So this is a two-part conversation today.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to start by talking a little bit about your trajectory and your career, because before Web3, there was still Amanda Schmidt in art for many years. Tell us about that journey and then how this naturally evolved.
There's so many different versions to tell this story.
We want the good.
I'll tell the one I told yesterday. I was actually with Raphael Rosendahl, who asked me this same question, which the perspective is different whether you're talking to like an artist that you admire, like Raphael, whose work I've known for many, many years, and to other people. But I'm from Wisconsin originally. I grew up in just on the edge of the countryside, like rural countryside, and I came into art around the time that YouTube was first launching. So my first exposure to what I thought was art was through the internet, where I lived. There were contemporary art museums. I didn't live in a family that brought me up, going to art museums and thinking about art and visual culture. I was really kind of a cultural void. Sorry, Wisconsin. But
still beautiful country.
It's still a beautiful state, and go Packers.
Took my dad out to Whistling Straits 2 summers ago. Played golf. I mean, gorgeous, nice people.
Very nice people. Yeah. But I learned about the art. I connected with the art world through the internet, and much of what I was seeing was media art. It was video art. It was performance artists putting their things online. And Raphael and I were talking about this yesterday, because I think a lot of people who were first putting things out there didn't necessarily see it as art when they started it. It was just an experimental tool, the internet, these websites, ways of sharing. And I think that moment has a lot of parallels with the rise of NFTs and the rise of the blockchain as a means to distribute creative material. Mm-hmm. So I get interested in video art. I moved to New York in 2007, working at Electronic Arts Intermix, which is one of the largest video archives in the world, and they keep their archives right in Manhattan. So one of my first jobs was literally like archiving and alphabetizing VHS tapes and working to have them digitized so that they can, carry forward into the
Back to the Future.
Back to the Future. And then I started working at galleries, and over the next 10 years, I wore several different hats in the art world in Manhattan. First, I started working at galleries. I worked at an art publication, Art Forum. I went from anything from like small experimental galleries in the Lower East Side to blue chip galleries like Marlborough in the heart of Chelsea. I went on to run an art fair called the Untitled Art Fair, which was founded in Miami in 2012.
We used to love going.
Yeah, it's still there. It's a super creative, very innovative fair. I actually ran a podcast there called Untitled Art Podcast, which focused on sound and media in contemporary art. So I was interested in creating a space for non-material artwork, and also to talk about art in a way that could be instantly transmittable. If you're not there in Miami Beach, there's this kind of FOMO. So what can we do to connect outwards? And so we actually did like vocal performances, poetry readings, interviews, musical performances. We had DJs come on. And
to make it accessible.
Yes.
People who are not on the beach.
Yes. And I also wanted to talk about art that could both transcend time and geography. So, not just like physical paintings that were being sold there, but all of this other great creative stuff that has been happening in the world. Not new, but like it's always happening, and we always need to find new channels to distribute it and bring new people into the art world. So I'm kind of skipping through the fast version. But with Untitled, I started spending a lot of time in the Bay Area because Untitled was looking to develop a second branch of the fair in San Francisco. So I started spending a lot of time trying to understand the collector base of the Bay Area, naturally Silicon Valley. People wanted to tap into that demographic. Are they collecting art? What are they collecting? What are they interested in? So I was able to meet a lot of people in the Bay Area at that time who ultimately became some of the clients that I work with today.
Just on Untitled, is that a profitable enterprise, that a profitable business to be in the art fair industry?
That's a good question. From what?
Because Art Basel appears to be very well endowed. They've got large corporate sponsors. BMWs are racing everywhere. UBS is plastered, and they charge a lot for tickets. But you have all the satellite fairs, and it's not clear, even for someone that has attended for a long time, where is the economic justification?
From what I know of the mechanics of an art fair, and I am quite certain that this is shared across other art fairs, the majority of their revenue is not coming from rentals. And that is very challenging for galleries to understand because it is incredibly expensive to participate in an art fair, particularly Art Basel.
Yes.
You learn about these booth fees, and it is
not just the booth fee, the fee for the flooring, the carpeting, whatever type of ingredients.
That's where the revenue is coming from. It's the markup on those things, which also, it's not necessarily the markup. A lot of it is because of union regulations, but the way that an art fair makes money is really through corporate sponsorships.
Got it.
And again, I haven't studied the economics of what's happening, but I don't think most art fairs are profitable this time. I think they need to find new revenue models. And I'm skipping ahead to another topic, but I think they have so much to gain from the NFT space and the digital art space in terms of rethinking profit models. And I know that Art Basel in particular has been going out, having conversations. I've heard like even one of the directors is actually doing studio visits with NFTs, a certain NFT artist that I know, and I found that to be really exciting and innovative, and glad to know that they're thinking in that direction. I think it will become a question of how they actually execute it in the years to come.
I interrupted you. You were finishing your story.
Untitled was great. I loved it. I also curated the programming. We had this, it started as a radio program that turned into a podcast, traveled a ton around the world. I was traveling it was like over 3 months out of the year, I was not at my home in New York. And at a certain point, that was a lifestyle I wanted to change. My husband and I wanted to have kids, so I did get pregnant, had my child, who I love. And at that time, I did go back to the gallery world, one more stint at a gallery called Kaufman Repetto, who I love, love, love. But ultimately, I was able to go and work privately for a couple of clients who I now do advising and collection building with.
And so what was that light bulb moment? It sounds like it was part of a continuum because you had already been interested in some of these new mediums. Mm-hmm. When did you have that aha moment that actually this is going to be something big and I'm already here and I can become a leader in this niche?
That's good. I mean, there's a couple of, the first moment is in March 2020, deep pandemic. That's the first time I start thinking about NFTs. I had been hearing the buzz a little bit, and we were in lockdown at that time. I'm still working for the gallery, and we are thinking, how can we pivot to adjust to this? Like, are we going to be in this for 2 weeks?
Are we going to be in business?
Nobody thought it would go on as, we were thinking, like, what do we do for the next month? Like, right. How can we pivot for the next month? And one of our first thought was, should our artists be minting NFTs? Like, are there video artists we work with that could benefit from this? Are there photographers that we work with that could benefit from this? Or are any of our artists wanting to use this tool in a creative way to mint something? We kind of peppered that idea around, and nobody was interested. So the gallery didn't actually end up doing anything, but I did advise. My husband is an artist, and he actually minted an NFT.
Well, you say I had one taker.
We had one, yeah, and he actually makes video art, so it wasn't completely it was a natural progression to just put a piece of media art that he already made onto the blockchain. So that was my entrance. Time goes on, a few years pass. I'm working for a client who's based in the South Bay. They are renovating their offices in the heart of Palo Alto, and it is a venture capital firm that focuses on fintech and crypto. And we were looking at some of the artists that they were already interested in personally, but then we started to think about what kind of art should go in this space. When you walk into this office, what will mean something to the types of people who are coming into this space for meetings? And I thought, how amazing would it be if you had a CryptoPunk? I knew about CryptoPunks kind of tangentially at that point. I had thought about them a little bit, but I hadn't gone in depth. So as we went into this project of acquiring a CryptoPunk for this collection, I went it opened the Pandora's box. And I have to say it was an exponential, very, very steep learning curve. Not just learning about CryptoPunks and also thinking about how to advise on acquiring an NFT to a traditional art collector, but then understanding which CryptoPunk, everyone's coming at you these traits and that rarity and,
gotta have a hoodie.
V1, V2, it's a lot. And that was just CryptoPunks. And then it was actually an essay that Curated wrote. Curated has this great editorial where they write about collecting different major series of NFTs, and they did such an incredible job kind of breaking it down. And so I really credit them for helping to educate me in those very early stages. In the end, though, the CryptoPunk, we didn't pay this first one. We didn't pay attention to traits or anything. We just sort of looked at what was on the market and picked one out that we really liked. So that set the criteria.
Aesthetically pleasing.
Yes. That set the criteria right away. That we were not going to focus on the numbers and the data. We were going to, trust my expertise of having worked in the art world and their taste and just pick one that we like. And
this is something we're going to have to look at.
Yeah, and ultimately that's why I work with all of my clients. If you don't love the piece, if it's not bringing you joy, if you don't, look at it every day and feel happy that you see it, then it's probably not a piece you should acquire. Different collectors have different criteria. Some people, they really are just looking at ROI, they see it as an investment. But I still do believe that if that investment fails, if you see it that way, then you at least love the piece.
Yeah. Totally agree. And part of the reason why we have made a point of framing works and hanging works is that we want to enjoy them as well. We were thinking about getting a full wall that would display all of the different digital pieces you saw. In lieu of all of those screens, we just created some wallpaper that our creative team had made with a lot of the early Metaversal purchases that are still near and dear to us. Some which have enormous value, and some that have very little value. They're still all our babies. And
like I said, when we were looking at it, they give each other
You're
value
right.
too. Even the ones that are seemingly worthless today, they give context to those other ones.
And to our journey.
Yeah.
So let me pick up on one thing that you mentioned, which is vital to me. How do you talk to traditional collectors, whether they have a tech orientation or not? My brother is not a tech-oriented commercial real estate developer. He's just a regular commercial real estate developer. He understands technology. He doesn't really understand any of this and will snarkily make his comments about the cartoon JPEGs. He does understand NFTs, so I have made some progress in the context of gaming, in-game purchases, because his son is constantly racking up charges on the credit card, which will happen to you in due course as your son gets older. But until then, what did you find was the easiest way, speaking to intelligent people who have a passion for traditional collecting, to get them to come around or for a light bulb to go off in their head?
I think I'm going to use one collector as an example. The thing that's easiest to bring up in this context is the concept of digital scarcity, or just scarcity in general. As we see a society that moves closer towards valuing digital objects over physical objects, it's only the natural path that these early examples of things that really set the precedent for all of the other artworks to come are going to be important artifacts and objects in the future. Are they important artworks or not? That, like, has yet to be seen in terms of art history, but I like to think that if we contextualize and think about them the right way, it will become clear what is simply, a JPEG online and what is a great work of art. But I think collectors who have children who are, Gen Z and younger can really understand this a lot better than an older generation. Not to say an older generation wouldn't, but, you look at teenagers today who really care, not all of them, but in many cases, they care more about their digital persona or their digital avatar than they do about their, their own body and their own appearance on a daily basis. Again, this is a generalization, but I think if you're not seeing that, then you're really not paying attention to the world around you. And so I think it takes a kind of person who can understand that this is the direction that the world is going in. And it's, obvious. You just look at the last 20 years. 20 years ago, nobody had an email address. You didn't understand what the use case was for an email address, and now you really can't do much in the world without. Well, that's email address. Then comes social media, iPhone, and social media. The other thing I would say is it does take a kind of collector who understands the concept of the avant-garde, or getting into something early, understanding that you might not understand what makes this valuable, but you feel something, even if it's confusion or like a disturbance or even a little bit of annoyance, like there's some feeling there. And I try to help collectors that I work with go with that feeling, even if it's something that might be
uncomfortable,
a little uncomfortable for them. Not going to push anybody off a cliff, but you look at all of the great kind of innovative periods in art history over the last 200 years. And there's always this moment at the beginning where artists, impressionists, minimalists, abstract artists that were ridiculed for what they were making when they started making it. And so it takes a certain kind of collector to say, I'm going to take a chance on this. And that's why I think it's important that you still like it in some way, because if you are going into new territory, you still have to find some sort of joy from it. It shouldn't feel like a
Robitussin.
yeah.
Who loves Robitussin? Would you say that the majority of your time today is spent in and around digital art, or you're still spending time and effort in physical art? How do you divide and conquer?
It's a real balance. Every week is different, but this week, for example, you asked me what my week has been like. I've been working with one collector who is a traditional art collector, and we, in this week, acquired both an outdoor sculpture that's going to go in their back patio. It's a bronze sculpture, very complicated. We've been thinking about
Shininess.
weather resistance, like does it need an extra urethane coat? Do we need a crane to rig it in? Do we need to pour, concrete base to make sure it, stays up over time? So we're kind of like crawling through that. And at the same time, this same collector, I got to acquire their first CryptoPunk this week.
Wow.
So, and then
none of those issues. There's no second coat that's needed.
Well, we did, they actually acquired the CryptoPunk last week, but this week we got a frame for it. And that was, that's another challenge, is how to exhibit these things once you have it.
So there will be a physical print in their place.
We actually got a digital frame.
Oh, very cool.
We jerry rigged. It's not a brand. It's kind of a frame that we found in China and ordered it and brought it over. And it's a little square frame. And
hardware has been a challenge. There have been so many different hardware devices and companies. We've probably come across them all. And the challenge in part has been, will they have the staying power? And can they fend off the inevitable from the really big boys, like an LG, like a Samsung, who will historically watch and observe the progress you're making and either take what you've done, because it may not be that novel, or they'll acquire you. But their preference is to just take what you've done. And Samsung frame in part represents an element of that, where it's a normal screen by all metrics. It has a unique surround, and then a library, which I see plenty of people now using. So it is coming. I envision that future where you walk into a hotel and it's not the spa offering or the food and beverage offering that greets you. It's linked to your digital wallet, which you chose to connect, and displays some of your favorite works that feel a little bit like home.
I love that idea.
Bring you that happiness, that moment where you walk in like, wow, they really do personalize things here, because they take so many of your preferences. Do you want to be near an elevator? Do you want a high floor? Do you want a low floor? Do you want this type of pillar or that type of pillar? Even though you have those preferences, 50% of the time, you don't care, and you put me next to the elevator. So
I love that
this
idea.
is easily within your control and creates that little dynamic that I think would bring each of us, particularly when we're out and about traveling, right? Anybody you speak to that says, I've been traveling for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, all they want to do is go home. Doesn't matter where home is. And so why not bring a little bit of home to wherever you're going?
There's an Italian artist named Bruno Monari who in the 1950s created a series called Scultura dei Viaggi. Pardon my Italian, but it just means traveling sculpture. And it's these folding sculptures that he made, sometimes in paper, sometimes in metal, and they were meant to you travel with them. You put it in your suitcase, you get to your hotel room or wherever you're staying, and kind of pop it open.
And there it is.
Yeah, he was prefiguring this idea, which sounds a lot more seamless, but
I'm working
we would love
on
that.
it. Okay,
idea.
I'm working on it. Tell us a little bit of your retrospective, and now that we're into 2025, going back the last 2 years, it's been a challenging period for our ecosystem, and yet behind the curtain, a lot of progress being made. Different artists still trying out different techniques, generative and others. So what have been your highlights? What do you think has impressed you the most if you survey just the last few years?
One of my favorite moments in my journey of learning about how artists are using the blockchain was attending Bright Moments in Paris. And I'm very sad that I missed all of the other Bright Moments that came before it, but that was a huge unlock moment for me before Bright Moments. And it's not, I'm sure there are other events too or other examples where I would have learned this, but before Bright Moments, when we were advising on generative works of art, we were most often going on the secondary market. Like especially with something like Fidenza, you have to go on the secondary market. That minted out long ago, but even mints that were happening, even in 2023, 2024, I would wait until the thing minted or mostly sold out and then look on secondary and pick a piece out that I thought was qualitatively the best. And if that meant we pay a little bit more for it, no problem, we'll get the best piece for the collection. And I did that, I shouldn't even admit this, but I did that when the Vera Molnar mint came out with Sotheby's. We waited until afterwards. Thankfully, we got in early enough, just moments after that minted out. But when I was at Bright Moments, it was the first time that I minted something for real.
On the spot.
Yes. And it was special because it was in person. So it was this very visceral experience. It was shared with other people. And in this case,
you felt like a celebrity. The price is right? Come on down.
Well, that's very fun because they would have this graphic and people would crowd around you to see what's the mint you're going to get. And there was this drum roll moment. And whatever popped up on the screen as your mint, in some cases it was great and perfect and an actual great work of art. In other cases, kind of a flop, obviously a flop, but it was yours.
Right.
And it was the thing that was mint, that is the way that the minting works. And you have this experience tied to it. And that's what made Bright Moments special. But the thing that I realized at that time was that the code is the artwork. And I know there's probably lots of artists and collectors listening to this right now and thinking ha ha ha, you just figured that out. But it did, I was really focused on the aesthetics and the outcome and not until that moment realizing that it's about trusting the process, trusting the artist, trusting that collaborative nature between the artist, the code, and the collector who makes that thing come to life. And so
and you became part of the process.
Yeah, then I became a collector too. So I couldn't stop from there. Anytime there's a new mint, I'm connecting. I love it. I love supporting the projects. I love seeing what comes out of it. You look at your collection, certain pieces you like more than others, but it becomes part of this larger narrative. And I think it was an unlock moment for me, and I think that can be a huge unlock moment for a lot of other people. So speaking about art fairs, I'm just why is this model not being implemented in a place like Art Basel?
That will be the subject of our lunch post podcast today, because we tend to agree. We had a number of team members that flew around participating in those different Bright Moment events with their crypto citizens, sometimes minting things. But these were really cultural events, and they were so well curated. The unfortunate part is that the economic model didn't work at all. And I had a little bit of that insight because part of the Bright Moments team traveled to Marfa for the recent Art Basel Marfa weekend in late 24. And there was a really interesting video that had been put together, sort of a retrospective of the Bright Moments journey.
Oh, yeah.
And it is quite instructive, whether you participated in Bright Moments in any capacity or not, seeing how that went from zero to really something. And it traveled from Argentina to France, Japan, you name it. It was covering every continent, touching different people, and the experience that they were able to shape was truly unique.
I mean,
I'd like to see more.
Do you think about the commentary about, you read the UBS reports, difference in collecting trends, like one of the main, patterns we keep seeing is that the millennial generation is a generation that's spending their money on experiences, not things. And so you have this new way of collecting that is an experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of the crypto native collectors I meet are millennials. They're also much older and they're much younger, so it does span like across generations. But I do think if that's the segment that the traditional art world is like lacking, then this is what I mean when I say they have a lot to learn from this scene in this community.
Fertile ground.
Yeah.
We know that there is a never-ending amount of fear, uncertainty, distrust, despair in our ecosystem. Notwithstanding some of the regulatory normalization that's now happening in Washington, just a few weeks ago, we had a major hack in Bybit, a centralized exchange. And that does filter down to all parts of the ecosystem. How have you navigated through those moments where a traditional collector would say, Amanda, I was worried about this, and the New York Times is reminding me every month that I really shouldn't be dabbling in this, and yet I'm passionate about what you're telling me, and so I am feeling uncomfortable, and I don't want so much robotism.
Yeah. Well, I'm an art advisor, not a financial advisor,
or medical advisor,
or a medical, yeah, definitely not. And I think it's important that I make that distinction with my clients and the people that I'm working with who are interested in collecting NFTs are fairly, if not very literate in their own finances and how their crypto wealth relates to the overall picture. So they mostly do their own research. What is it? The DYOR.
Yes.
I just wear that sticker. Yeah.
They're prepared to deploy what they want to deploy. Do you find?
I think, like I said earlier in our discussion, I think if you are somebody who's collecting this kind of art, you are comfortable with taking chances, taking risks,
and sizing it accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say, on balance, most of the clients that you work with are true collectors in the sense that they want to build these pieces for their primary use, primary enjoyment, or is there a segment that really is investing in this asset class, don't feel so compelled to showcase it? If they have physical works, maybe they're keeping them in secure storage in Delaware and shielded from sales and use tax. How does that formulation factor in?
Currently, all of the clients I work with are people who are collecting because they're passionate about art and finding meaning through the artworks that they live with or have in their collections. I have worked with clients before who are primarily focused on art as an asset. That's a fun job too, but
yeah.
it's a different, it's a different conversation. And one of the things that is most rewarding to me in working with collectors is to really talk about the art and what it means to them and what kind of questions arise and how do their kids react to it and what does it mean when you see the same piece when you wake up every day. I am fairly fortunate to work with people who think very deeply and profoundly about the work that they're collecting. I will mention a pattern that I've seen with digital art collecting that is hugely inspiring to me, which is that when you're buying work of traditional art, you buy a painting, you get excited about it, you want to share it with somebody. You're in Art Basel, or you're on a business trip. You're seeing somebody, you're not at your home, you can't show them your painting. You take it on your phone, and so often I see collectors like, here's the painting, and like, oh well, like it doesn't really look that way in person, or like you can't see that detail. Like the picture of the thing is never the thing. The digital art collection, the thing that you're showing on your phone, whether it's a JPEG or a dynamic work or a GIF, that is the artwork. And I've seen collectors when they share their digital art collection, there's this confidence in knowing that the thing
this is the best.
It doesn't have to be explained, yeah. Right. And so I'm seeing how like sharing your traditional art collection like in a digital mode can really fall flat. And I think that's one reason why some people are drawn to this, because you can have your physical traditional art collection and a digital art collection, and be able to share in different contexts and in different purposes with friends, colleagues, family members, etc., or publicly eventually.
Showing people a photo of this physical work is not nearly as much of a flex as being able to show a high-res digital image where it started. Sorry.
Yeah.
Talk to us about tips that you give to digital art collectors who are just approaching it for the first. Again, we'll use my brother as our everyman example. If he was sitting here at the table and he is willing and interested, what are your top 3 tips for guiding him to start? What is a place of departure?
Well, I do always point people towards the curated essays. It really is a resource I just go back to again and again. They've only written like 6 or 7, so it's a good resource. Number 2, I never thought I'd be saying this, but I tell people, like, if you don't have a Twitter account, you probably should, because it's such a wealth of information. And I know that's very controversial right now, like especially Twitter in the last couple of weeks.
Well, I don't think it's controversial to say there is a tremendous amount of information on Twitter. You need to be able to filter through.
Yeah, people don't love Twitter right now.
Yeah. They don't love Elon, right? I mean, no one's buying Tesla cars today.
I think it's the algorithm. It's just sort of like how it's changed since it's become X. I guess maybe that's why I call it Twitter. But I never had a Twitter account. It's not like I'm like a Twitter maxi, who's been on it for 10 years.
Me neither.
But I did get on it a few years ago, and it's just like with anything. Like if you're collecting traditional art, what I would say is go to art galleries, go to art fairs, like see as much as you can. So if you're interested in collecting digital art, a lot of these artists are pretty active on Twitter, and they will share links so that you can see what they're working on, whether it's to a new mint that they're doing or a link to their website, or maybe they're posting their work directly on the feed.
What are other artists that they're inspired by?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the community aspect, like the way that the community is connected here is one of the most beautiful parts of this ecosystem. But yeah, I would say look, that's the other good thing about digital art is you can look at a lot in a very short amount of time. The double-edged sword to that is how do you filter through it? When you have so much visual information, how do you know what's good and what's not? And then number 3 is I would encourage people to go to a IRL event, whether that's our Blocks in Marfa or to Bright Moments or whatever the next big IRL NFT event will be. I hear there's a couple of spaces opening in New York for starters, but to actually go and connect with people. And that's the same advice I'd give to somebody who is interested in collecting traditional art. The difference that I'm seeing with this space, with artists who are using the blockchain and the way that they're connecting with each other, thanks to X, that then translates into real life events, is there does seem to be this openness to dialogue and conversation and different backgrounds, different approaches, different opinions in a way that it's much more flexible and engaging than a lot of things in the traditional art world right now. I think the traditional art world has become very hierarchical, stratified, and stagnant. And so I've seen a lot of excitement in the digital arts.
Well, it's approachable. And I always liken it to when the sommelier comes over to the table at the restaurant and everybody starts to do this whole charade and song and dance. Very few of us are actual wine connoisseurs. And so, would you like assistance looking at the wines? Red or white? I don't know about the 48 different options that you have here. I want something that tastes dry. And so people pretend to read the names, and instead they're just looking at the numbers. And art historically feels similar. You walk into a gallery and it's like, am I in the right place? Because I'm not being greeted like a liberator. In fact, no one's even looking. I mean, if they're looking at me, it's, are you actually going to be trudging all that mud into our gallery? And so there's a discomfort, just like in ordering the wine. It's like, I'm just thirsty, or I'm just interested in learning about this artist that you're exhibiting. Let's make it approachable and fun and low pressure.
Yeah.
So I do think you're right that in the digital context, the pendulum had swung the other side. It's like, anyone's welcome. Doors are open, folks. Come on in. Price of entry is some sort of digital account. And you can choose to look, you can choose to buy. And there are so many opportunities now, whether you have collecting groups, you have organizations like Random, 6529, a number of these dedicated DAOs, Flamingo DAO, Pleaser DAO, Fingerprint DAO. So they've been expressed in so many different ways. There's no shortage of opportunities to dive in.
I also have to say, not to knock on my colleagues in, who are working in galleries, but I do think that the gallery model, I'm not saying anything that's totally new here. It really is broken.
Okay,
and the reason people don't look up from their desk, it's not because they don't want to talk to you. It's because they're so far behind and whatever they need to catch up on, or trying to make another sale or catch up on the registry. Like, it's just, people working in brick and mortar galleries are overworked, exhausted, and just trying to keep up with the market pressure. And because I've been there.
And it's an unwinnable race.
Yeah.
And in the pandemic period, so many, particularly the small galleries and even some mid-sized galleries, realized they had that moment, which is, this is entirely unsustainable. We're chasing the blue chip guys. We can't attend every event and every new gallery exhibition or Art Basel event that they start expanding to. The cost of shipping and transporting is just egregious. And yet we feel compelled that this is the rat race we're in. So what do you think the future of the gallery model for our space should look like? You referenced that there are some spaces. I'm going to one this afternoon.
Yeah.
My friend Benzie in Soho. We understand Super Rare is actually opening a physical spot on the same block.
Oh, wow.
So it excites me.
That's
We're going to have a
nice.
little cluster.
Two makes a neighborhood, I think.
This is right in Bowery. If you had your druthers and you snapped your fingers, and let's say that cost is not the issue to start with, what's the ethos of that new gap?
It's a great question. It is the code it's the $1 million, the $1 billion question.
This is going to be a long lunch then.
I don't, if I had that answer, I'd probably be starting a gallery right now. But one major obstacle I see is that many of the artists that I think traditional art galleries could really benefit from working with, or whose work would actually really fit in their program and could revitalize the face of the gallery. The artists don't need them because the gallery is taking 50%. And when a gallery takes 50% in a traditional model, it does make sense. I know it sounds like a lot, but they're still, like you said, they're storing, they're shipping, they're doing photographic documentation, preservation.
Marketing.
Yeah. With the digital art, all that stuff gets cut out. So how would an artist who has found success in their tokenized artwork, how would they justify giving a gallery 50%? And I am seeing, like, with the rise of artist agents and certain artists, like, realizing that they can negotiate that percentage. I think what we will see are traditional galleries potentially shifting that commission number based on the type of artists that they're working with, rather than just having a flat 50% across the board rule.
One or done.
Yeah.
To that point, how do you think about artist representation? We were talking about galleries as a vehicle for collectors to come and learn and engage. Obviously, the artists are a component of it, but what about artist representation? There are many artists, even that I've gotten together with just in the last few weeks, who lament the fact that we want to focus the majority of our time on our creative interests.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, to be successful in this space, I have to be a social media manager, I have to be my own PR and marketing person. They look at someone like a Rafiq Anadol, who is one part creator, but two parts marketeer, and has pushed himself into an entirely different uh, arena, literally at the Sphere in Las Vegas, and shows left, right, and center, including at the entrance to MoMA, because he has embraced that which for some creators, it's anathema to their being. They don't want to be the self-promoter. So what does that representation model of the future need to look like?
That's a really good question. I think that's a huge area where there's a lot of opportunity for people to come in and develop artist agencies, new models of artist representation. I know that in the traditional art world, a lot of galleries are not able to themselves to keep up with the kind of representation. You know, they're bogged down in the sales aspects, and shipping the art fairs and things like that, that they're not doing everything you just mentioned. And that's why a lot of traditional artists are starting to work with these agents. And you hear it more and more, like every month, you know, a new person working with an agent. And I am seeing that a lot of the generative artists making tokenized artwork, they could really benefit from representation or simple feedback and advice. Which platform should I make with? Should I make 100 or should I make 1,000? I just need a sounding board. You know, like I think there's great need for more of that. How that combines with a brick and mortar space, you know, has yet to be seen, if at all. But I think, you know, there are these different we call them platforms, like ArtX Code, for example.
Sure.
They're not a gallery. They're not necessarily an agent. They're not necessarily a secondary dealer. I think that term is vague, and I don't know if that's the term that is right, that we're just going to refer to artist platforms. But I think that the semantics of it, or whatever title we want to give, will probably emerge in the next 1 to 2 years.
Agreed. Final questions, because
we're getting hungry.
And we got to get cooking. What do you forecast as the most exciting trend over the next year, let's say, in the digital art ecosystem? What excites you?
It's a great question.
In your crystal ball.
The thing that I'm seeing, I'll use Sam Spratt's Masquerade as an example, or Beeple's Diffuse Control, or there was a new piece that just came out, like some works that Jack Butcher made on Rodeo. Like, I like these works that I'm calling them kind of network art. It's not systems art. It's not about the software, but it's about creating a network that the artwork that you're producing both connects people, either because they're collecting with it or they're interacting with it, and then that network grows from there. And there's this beauty in this kind of dynamic artwork, whether it's interactive or not. Like, either it's interactive and you actually change the work, or it's just simply collectible and that the collectors connect because of it. Those are artworks that I think we're going to see more and more of, and I think that is almost a new movement or genre in digital art. And you can't do that without, I mean, you can, but the blockchain makes it much more seamless and something that technical experts and novices can experiment with. So that's something, you know, generative art was the big thing the last couple of years. Networked art
All right.
is the next thing.
We're gonna mark you to market 24 months. And then final point, I just want to talk about how you see museums and other traditional cultural institutions beginning to engage. I recall a conversation I had with a senior person at the Met, maybe 3 years ago. It was early 2022. We had a coffee. We've known each other a long time. And I joked and said, when are you guys going to get your shit together and start doing stuff in the digital art arena? And they smiled like, well, you know, the Met is not a first mover. And so we'll start to probably get around in 2025. And lo and behold, I was at the Met a few weeks ago, and they were introducing their first blockchain-based experience, which is a game that Audrey and the TR Labs folks had helped put together. Very innovative and a lot of fun. So actually, that was correct. Mark to Market took 3 years, and they're doing it. We know that others like LACMA, MoMA have leaned in a bit more. So how do you survey where we are today and where you think things are progressing?
So, I mean, the Met is a great example. Like, we'd love to see the Met like sort of be the leader and set precedent, but of course, that's not their mandate. The other thing is, you think about museums like the Met, MoMA, Guggenheim. Do they have, audience and visitorship and participation issues? No, like
Not
they're
really.
full every day. So I think where we will see leaders in the field emerge are going to be smaller, regional, and academic institutions.
Toledo Museum of Art.
Exactly. Toledo is a great example. And they will be the leader in this field. Adam and his team are doing there and engaging their audience in a way that other smaller museums can learn from. And I think those, it just got voted #1 museum in the US by, I don't know who was the platform that announced this, but they will make themselves more relevant and more engaging and more cutting edge than these, kind of monolith museums in urban centers that have great collections, but they are not necessarily focused on moving them into the 21st century.
And what about all the new institutions, Middle East, Asia, right? We see enormous growth. It's not many brand new museums opening up in Europe, parts of those capital cities or across the United States. Is that an opportunity where you say, well, wait a minute, Saudi Arabia, you're building a massive new cultural institution and you got a lot of white space, and maybe some of that white space should be dedicated to this movement.
Yeah, so I haven't had the opportunity to visit the Middle East ever in any of the museums that are building up there, but I do think that they are positioned incredibly well to build the collection of the 21st century. You build many great museums are successful because they have great collections. You go to the Louvre because you want to see the Mona Lisa. You go to MoMA because you want to see Starry Night. Like you have these great works from 19th and 20th century that have become iconic, and that is what sells the tickets to go back and see what has been made. MoMA, however, was founded in 1929 with a collection of avant-garde art that nobody really wanted at the time. So these museums in the Middle East, I think, are positioned to be able to build those collections that in 2070 or 2120, oh my God, I can't even.
2125. You may still be here. I want you to know, modern medicine, we may have to do another podcast, 2125.
They will, I think it's very possible that they will have the best collections of art of the 20th century because they have the ability to build those collections.
Thank you for taking time to come in and speak with me and our audience. And we look forward to continuing this conversation in the months ahead.
Thank you for having me.